The mystery of George Cecil, a man of many surprises. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the twisted life of my great-grandfather and the discoveries that I've made about him that were very surprising, as well as how a Good Samaritan has helped me break through a brick wall that's been standing for decades and discover who his parents were and really the true story and the true age of George. I have talked about him over the years, and I have to tell you, I have a story for you. I did an interview with Connie Knox of Genealogy TV, and I had a Good Samaritan provide a little snippet of information that actually helped me break through a brick wall that's been bothering me for decades. So hold on tight, because this is a crazy story. All right, I gotta break in here because there has been some crazy developments that have happened, and there's more to this story than when I originally filmed this video. So stay tuned and get to the end, because I'm gonna be asking for your help because I really need it. All right, I'm Aimee Cross. I'm here to help you to take your genealogy to the next level. Let me dive into the story of George. So George, my great-grandfather, he listed all sorts of places on his records. He listed that he was born in 2 different cities, one of them being New York City in New York. He listed that he was born in Australia. He listed that he was born in England. He said his parents were born in Australia, England, and Scotland. He was never consistent. His birth ages ranged over 10 years. It was just kind of crazy. And not only that, the family kind of had this stigma about George. I had heard that his wife's family in Seattle didn't really love him, but I was never told why. Well, a couple of years ago, I discovered that he had actually been married before. And I talked about this on my video with Connie because it was kind of a scandal, because he asked for a divorce and his wife complained that he made fun of her because she was so much older than he was. And by the way, she was even older than he was, than he let her know, because he lied about his age on his marriage record. And so he was the age of her children. And he takes her to the United States, and then he divorces her. Now, there may be more to the story, but it was kind of scandalous. And then he ended up with my great-grandmother. Well, nobody knew this in the family. My grandmother might have, and she never told anybody, but nobody ever knew about it, and I just found out about it a couple of years ago. Well, I was talking about it on this video with Connie Knox, and we were talking about how this story has been such a scandal, and I still can't figure out where he was born. Well, because of the changing information, I actually wondered whether he was a Stevenson, because my DNA results were inconclusive. My autosomal DNA results did not line up. I was not able to find a common ancestor between the few matches that I had. And the Y DNA results gave me nothing, and certainly didn't correspond with the Stevenson surname. And so we were like, maybe he was illegitimate. That's kind of what we were thinking, that he was illegitimate. Well, when I talked about the fact that I had found that he had been previously married to this woman that he divorced in Seattle, in the UK, I had a viewer from the UK reach out to me and say, I would love to help you on this. This is a wonderful mystery. And he found a newspaper article that I had never had access to. So I took the opportunity to interview him, and you got to hear this story. It's fantastic. It was truly your discovery of that newspaper article that really made all of the difference for me. So, Michael, thank you. You're the best.
You're very welcome.
Well, I'm so grateful to have you here to do this with me, Michael. Thank you so much. I wanted to talk a little bit about, you were watching the video that I did with Connie Knox on Genealogy TV, right? Where I kind of tell the story about my George Cecil. Tell me
Yes.
about how you got into genealogy and what brought you to, what attracted you to that video. Tell me a little bit more about how this happened on your end.
Okay, so it all started during COVID. And in 2020, I thought, I'll just have a look and see what pops up. And after nearly 5 years of doing it, I've gone back to William the Conqueror on both sides of the tree and been doing it for family friends, friends at school. And it's become a passion of mine personally. So
Well, you're amazing at it. You gave me good stuff because not only did you give me the newspaper article that really broke this open for me, but you also gave me other suggestions and I was able to kind of compare those with other possibilities. And you were right on the money. And so, way to go. I found the death record of William George and I ordered it, and it confirmed that the ones that you thought, they are the right people. I was really worried that, gosh, this looks good, but with a common name like that, you have to be so careful. It's so easy for people to grab the wrong information. I pulled the death certificates just earlier this week, and William George's death certificate names his son George Cecil. So it's
You
awesome.
found him in the end. In the end, you found him.
Yeah, so it worked out. And honestly, it's because of you. You're the reason that this happened.
I think my actions require that much praise, but thank you.
Let me give you a little bit of background on my family, so because I think you might find it kind of fun. So I've been doing genealogy for over 40 years. I started when I was a teenager, like you, actually. I was about 16 when I started doing genealogy. And and we had a lot of family stories. And when I was doing genealogy, then I was going into a library and looking at census records on microfilm. You know what I mean? Like I can do in 5 minutes, seriously, I can do in 5 minutes what took me a day or more to do, then. And so it was hard work. And the family stories on George Cecil were a little bit inconsistent. And some of the stuff that I found out about him, like he went to the University of Washington. Well, I contacted them and they had no record of George Cecil ever being there. So there were some family things, some family stories that had happened that made my aunt and I really kind of think, he wasn't telling the truth about anything. And so I kind of assume, like everybody does, at least in the States, well, he must have been a criminal that was sent over there from England. And you know what I mean? And so I'm looking in these convict records for years. You know what I mean? I'm trying to find anything. And George Stevenson is not that uncommon of a name. And I just could never find anything that looked right, that felt right, that I felt like was probably him. I ordered his Social Security application, which is Social Security application in the United States. People don't realize they may see that on Ancestry, but you can actually order it. And it has the name of the parents, even if it doesn't show that on Ancestry. So here you see that he has his dad listed as George William, which is great. But then Stevenson is typed in, so that's not in his handwriting. And then he has Mary Elizabeth, and then somebody wrote in unknown. So we really kind of felt like maybe they assumed, and it really isn't Stevenson, and he was illegitimate. That's kind of the what we've been kind of going on. And I kind of had tabled it. I'd kind of hit it every once in a while for a little while, gotten frustrated, then gone off. But I have a basic subscription to find my past, but I did not have a subscription that allowed me to look at the newspaper articles. So tell me a little bit more about what you found and how you went about finding that because it was so helpful.
Okay, so when I saw that you knew he was either born in Australia or New York or England, I thought, well, you mentioned this really old marriage that happened in England. I thought, well, there's normally a paper in the newspaper for it. I thought, let me go look. And there it was. In Fire Past, I put in George Cecil Stevenson and boom, just
Wow,
there.
that was so cool. And it was so easy for you. To be honest with you, I'm kind of like, why did I not try that so long ago? But in all honesty, I didn't find out about that second marriage until about 2 years ago. So that was a fairly new discovery for me. So thank you so much. So this newspaper article is really what broke it down for me because that was another confirmation of, people will change around George William, William George. That doesn't bother me so much. That newspaper article that one gave me a location or several locations in Australia to look. And it gave me additional confirmation of that name, William George, and the fact that he was the second son. And the genealogy has proven it. So I had done some research and I had found a number of people that looked like they were possible children of a William George Stevenson and Elizabeth Mary McCullough. You had found Elizabeth's death record, and I had found that as well. But I hadn't ordered it yet because I didn't want to spend the money unless I was kind of sure, that we were on the right track. And so, but I'd found Frederick Williams' marriage record mentions his parents. And in my family, there's talk of a Frederick, and in my family, there's talk of an Edward. And so that was jiving, but I still wasn't convinced because I didn't find anything for a George Cecil that tied me to these people. On their son Frederick's marriage record, it says that his father is deceased. And so I knew he had died prior to 1903. So then I started looking for George William. But the thing that's the best part about Australian death records is they ask the place of marriage and the time of marriage and to whom. And then they ask about the children of the marriage. Here's the marriage information, and here's the children of the marriage. So this was like the nail. This gave me all that I needed to find. I was like, yes. Anyway, I did a major celebratory dance here in California when I found this out. So I just wanted to thank you for being such a good Samaritan and helping me discover this about my family history. You're the best. It was so kind of you to take a few moments out of your day to pull up that newspaper article for me because it really did change everything.
You're welcome.
And I didn't even know when you first started sending me emails, I didn't even know you were 17. And so I thought you were an old guy who was sitting around working on this, but no, you're somebody that is young and into this. And I love that because discovering your family, is it not such an amazing experience for you, regardless of your age? Tell me what that's meant to you.
It's thrilling. Honestly, it's thrilling because you go from knowing nothing to knowing almost everything so quickly.
Yeah.
And now that we have the tech to do it, we can do it like that. And it's so fun, honestly. I love it.
And you want to know the next step, and I have just started on this because I think this is really interesting. Either William George had two families, or or there's people that have totally messed him up.
It keeps getting more and more interesting.
I know it. So now there's a new element to my crazy, twisted George family.
It's never gonna end. It's never gonna end.
It's never gonna end with this family. I don't have any other families that are as crazy as this. All right, so the craziness and where I need your help. George did have two families, and I cannot find any divorce record from his first wife, and she lived longer than he did. So she didn't predecease him. And the other really crazy thing is that the children of his second marriage, I can't find their birth records anywhere. And Australia has great records for birth records and baptism records. So this just doesn't all fit together. Let me give you the quick 411. And then anybody who is good at Australian research, if you want to help me out with this, I would absolutely love it because I have been spending so much time trying to find this. All right, so the first mystery was there were two different Georges. My George's death certificate said William George Stevenson and his wife and his children that I descend from. And there was a newspaper article, an obituary that used William George Stevenson and talked about his wife and children, but it didn't name them. And it kind of talked about him being a kind of in a literary circle. But then there was this other George J.W. or George John William Stevenson who descends from George Stevenson who helped settle South Africa in the 1830s. Big name up there. I mean, he was the secretary to the governor. So he's pretty well known. And so this George J.W. Stevenson is well known as well. And I was examining all sorts of things because everybody, all these trees, all over the place, the wiki trees everywhere. People were saying that George J.W. Stevenson's death was the same as my George. But I have the actual death certificate, and he's not listed as George J.W., and his wife and children are not listed as the children that are known of George J.W. And so I do a lot of research on that wife, those children, and all of this information. And what do I find? There's a couple of newspaper articles for George J.W. Stevenson, particularly those in South Australia, which is where he resided when he was with this first family. And it talks about the fact that he worked for the Star. And the death certificate for William George says that he worked as an associate editor of the Star. So that's tying these two Georges together. In addition, I couldn't find any death certificate for George J.W. This is a good case study because You need to look at all these different records and kind of try to fit these puzzle pieces together. And sometimes in the absence of other information, you have to draw some conclusions. So the conclusions that I've drawn thus far is that George John William Stevenson is in fact the same man as my William George Stevenson, the father of my George Cecil. He had 3 children prior to his relationship with his wife, Elizabeth Mary McCullough, when he had an additional 5 children that are listed on that death certificate. Let me show you his family tree. So when I see George John William, he's the son of George Stevenson and Margaret Gordon. This is the first wife that's written in biographies and all sorts of information. Lucy Margaret Stevenson was a well-known soprano. And George Francis Stevenson, I haven't found a lot on him. There's a couple of George Francises, and I'm not positive about which is which, and I don't want to make a mistake there, so I'm holding back. And then there's a John James Stevenson, and I believe that John James died in 1947. And then here we have the other spouse, perhaps, or partner, Elizabeth Mary McCullough, with these 5 children that are listed on the death certificate. And I've done additional research on them, and there are scattered records that identify their parents as William George and Elizabeth Mary McCullough. So that all fits together. Now, the strange thing is there are some divorce records available from Australia and from South Australia, and I've not been able to find anything for George William, William George, George J.W. I can't find anything for a George Stevenson or anything like that, and a Jeannie Miller Davidson Stevenson. And so I don't know that he ever divorced. There are some articles that show that he relocated to New South Wales. And that was shortly before the birth of his first son with the second woman. Now, the other really weird thing, and if you know about research in Australia, you know how this works, but really they're great for birth records. And there's lots of birth records from this time period. George lived in New South Wales during the time of the births of these children. I cannot find a birth certificate for any of them. I have tried looking, not necessarily a certificate or any kind of birth record. I have looked for them with different last names. I've looked for them by just searching their first name, which is a great strategy. And then their birth date. I've taken a bunch of stuff out of the filters, and you can watch my video on search strategies on Ancestry to see kind of what I was doing. I've tried searching for birth records under their mom, Elizabeth Mary McCullough, because that, I believe, is her maiden name. Maybe she was previously married and these guys are the children of somebody else and William George adopted them. I don't think so, though. And but I can't find them. I can't find records of these guys anywhere. So if you are into Australia genealogy, or maybe you live in Australia and you can help me out, I've been scouring newspaper articles on newspaper.com and on Trove, which is a great website, by the way, for Australian research. I'm not super deep into this because my son's getting married and I'm kind of busy. But I know there's so many of you out there that are so fantastic at doing research in Australia. I'm throwing a shout out. Help me out here. Now, my tree is public, and I'm going to put a link to it in the video description. But my tree, if you want to search for it, it's a little bit of a different name, so maybe you'll find it, is 1-Stevenson Working Family Tree. And it's public, so you can go check out my tree and see what I have in there and see what you think and see some of the records that I found, as well as links to the newspaper articles and things like that. But I would love your help. I am so grateful to Michael. I'm so thankful for him taking the time to pull what he knew would be a newspaper announcement. And quite frankly, I didn't know that actually confirmed some of that information and allowed me to break down the brick wall. Now I'm on to the next mystery. Isn't it wonderful how the kindness of one person can completely change the trajectory of somebody else's? Thank you to all the Good Samaritans out there who help people as they're trying to discover their ancestors. And I hope you have a great day.